Welcome everyone, welcome. Thank you for joining today's webinar. Now on the webinar, I'm sure we all come from different experience levels with Lean Six Sigma. Those of us that are just being introduced to it for the first time, and those of us that maybe have been practitioners for a while and we just like to keep our skills sharp and just to learn about different things. Right? So some of you would be able to present this webinar as well. So, but this is just like we would see an introduction to Lean Six Sigma, talking about how it can improve productivity. But I do hope that in the future, as we go through this webinar and go through the materials, I really do like what our host was sharing with you, that I do enjoy teaching and sharing about the principles of Lean Six Sigma and seeing how that applies to what you do. So hopefully sometime in the future we're able to connect and I can see what you do and help apply the Lean Six Sigma principles even more than what we're going to present here. Right, how it's about a key to productivity. So this is a little bit about me. Right? Of course, I'm a Lean Six Sigma practitioner and trainer. I have my black belt certification through ASQ. I've seen Six Sigma applied in many different areas. Manufacturing, IT, supply chain, different job titles, but the one that I enjoy is being a student of each and every one of you, learning how to make businesses successful. I've been teaching with Simplilearn for a long time, and I enjoy Six Sigma, but I also enjoy leadership. So I don't have to spend much time about myself. Let's jump right into the lesson that we have here. So as we're talking about productivity, there are certain principles that we need to be aware of in regards to Lean Six Sigma. And we're talking about principles and not principles, but they're very important that we need to understand what's going on. And these principles are the key behind Six Sigma. These are the key to unlock the productivity. Right? So a principle is a fundamental truth or a proposition that serves as the foundation for a system, a belief, or a behavior for a chain of reasoning. Or it could just be a fundamental source or basis for something. Right? So our principles guide how we think, how we operate, everything about our choice of actions. So the same thing would be true from the Lean Six Sigma perspective. There are certain principles that guide, that make Lean Six Sigma what it is, and those are the key to unlocking productivity. And so what I'm going to present to you today are several of those principles, as we talk, since we're talking about productivity of Lean Six Sigma. So there are other well-known principles out there in the world. We have the Bernoulli principles, about how the air going over a wing and the air under the wing, the difference in the speed of the air moving over a wing causes lift. And that's how we have airplanes and we have flight. It's based off of a principle there. It's a truth. We have Archimedes' principle, as you can see here on the slide. Archimedes' principle that's about buoyancy and how our ships and how things stay afloat. How water has a pressure forcing up on things that go into it. We have the Pareto principle. This may be one that many of you are aware of in the realm of Lean Six Sigma, or maybe you're not aware of that. The Pareto principle is the 80-20 rule. 80% of the effort expended is due to 20% of the individuals, or 20% of the causes. Pareto principle was originally discovered when looking at the world's wealth, that 80% of the wealth was owned by 20% of the population. And since then, that principle was then expanded and applied to many different other things and industries. And so these are principles. These are key truths that have been discovered, already existing, but they have been discovered by bright individuals over the years. So the same thing is true when we're talking about Lean Six Sigma, that these are just truths that were already in existence, and that Lean Six Sigma just brought together. So as you might have heard the expression, there's nothing really new under the sun. Lean Six Sigma didn't really create something that was revolutionary in nature. It brought what was already there of how things work, how processes should be looked at, how we should go after continuous improvement. It brought it under one umbrella, and we have Lean Six Sigma. So we're going to walk through some of the principles behind it. And just for the time that we have here, we're going to go through 4 of these key principles that unlock the key to productivity of Lean Six Sigma. One is quality. we're going to look at DMAIC, data-driven, and being a change agent. So we have an emphasis on quality. Six Sigma follows a rigorous methodology known as DMAIC. DMAIC stands for Define, Measure, Analyze, Improve, and Control. Number 3, decision-making is made and is based on data and statistical analysis. And lastly, number 4, being a change agent is critical. And this is just from my own personal experience. Right? This is not something that you might go to a seminar and hear something else from a different quality individual or someone with their own experience. But for me, working in these different industries, seeing Lean Six Sigma applied, I've seen that quality is critical. Of course, following a particular process, using data, and being an agent of change. And we're going to break down each of these in some more detail as we go throughout. So principle number 1, emphasis on quality. And how is quality unlocking productivity? But the first question that we need to answer is, what is quality? So Henry Ford is known as saying that quality means doing it right when no one is looking. Steve Jobs says that quality is more important than quantity. One home run is much better than 2 doubles. And so there are various definitions of what we mean by quality. But at the end of the day, what I want to know is, what is quality to you? Think about it, we're all consumers, we're all customers to some product or to some service. And so we have an idea of what quality means. And that is what's critical. That's why I pose that question. We look at from a Lean Six Sigma perspective, the principle of how it helps us unlock productivity, right, is we're focused on the customer. So we've all been experienced buying, maybe it's your favorite candy, whether it's chocolate M&Ms, peanut M&Ms, the plain M&Ms, or the peanut butter. And we all maybe have experienced a bag of M&Ms or whatever your favorite candy is. Now, from that level, there are probably smaller things we would expect. We don't have a lot of requirements when it comes to candy. If I have a bag of M&Ms, yes, I don't want any foreign objects in my bag of candy. If I have peanut M&Ms, I want to make sure that each M&M has a peanut inside of it. If that's not the case, if I don't see that, I would be disappointed. That would be, in my mind, low quality. Now, because that's a lower purchase, it's harder for us probably to identify what's quality and what's not. But for a more expensive purchase, like a vehicle, for instance, a car or a home or an apartment, whatever it is that we may be purchasing at a higher level, at a higher cost to us, it's probably easier to think of what we're looking for. Right? With a car, there are certain features that we may want, power lock, power windows, possibly in some areas air conditioning, miles per gallon, and those would be things that dictate the quality of the vehicle for us. And so quality comes from that customer perspective. And that's key when we're talking about productivity, because we need to understand what's going on in our processes that's going to impact providing that quality to the customer. Right? Not from our business perspective, but from that customer perspective. Right? So in Six Sigma, quality is simply defined as our ability to adhere to customers' requirements. Simply put. And so here, I also enjoy a good cup of coffee. And so we're going to talk about quality in terms of a cup of coffee. So let's say the desired temperature of a cup of coffee is between 160 degrees Fahrenheit and 180 degrees Fahrenheit. That specification, we call that, would be quality. That's our desired quality level, our customer requirement. So here we're looking at a particular process. This is a frequency distribution. It's called the normal distribution. Won't get into all the details of that now. But let's just say we go to your favorite coffee establishment. We collect 100 cups of coffee, and we're going to measure the temperature. Right when it comes out, what's the temperature of that cup of coffee? Because we know, as a customer, we like our cup of coffee between 160 degrees Fahrenheit and 180 degrees. So for every cup of coffee, we're going to take a measurement, and we'll plot it on this graph. So the higher the value of this curve, that means we observed more cups of coffee. So our average, a majority of the cups of coffee that we observed was at 170 degrees Fahrenheit. We did observe a few that fell outside or that was colder than we liked. And we did have some that was hotter than we had intended. And so quality is, again, our ability to adhere to our customers' requirements. This would indicate poor process capability for us. Now, using Lean and Six Sigma, we were going to try to reduce that variation in the process so that we have a higher level of quality. Now we see that when we go back and we measure this information, that there are no cups of coffee, we don't have any, relatively, that are outside of the customer's expectations. Right? We don't have any that are too cold, and we don't have any that are too hot. So this is an example of excellent process capability. And it's all based off of what the customer has asked, which allows us to be more productive. And so at the end of the day, what we're left with is we're left with a customer who is very happy. Right? The one on the left, some customers will get coffee that's right in the right temperature and others won't. So you never know what day of the week to go in for coffee or what time of the day or what's going to happen on the one on the left. On the one on the right, we have consistency. Our customers will get a consistent temperature for their cup of coffee and be satisfied if that is one of their customers' requirements. Of course, that's just one. When we go for a cup of coffee, there are several things that we may like, right? The sweetness, the flavor. But this is just an example looking at the temperature for that cup of coffee. So principle one is about quality. So the activities in Six Sigma are designed to take us and our organizations to higher levels of quality, which in turn goes to productivity. And what I want you to know, if you've never heard this before about Six Sigma, when we're talking about that level of quality, this gives us to a lot of productivity. When you think about productivity, it's doing things effectively, right? Doing things efficiently. At a Six Sigma level, that means we only have 3.4 defects per million opportunities. In relation to our example about cups of coffee, that means out of 1 million cups of coffee, only roughly 3.4 of them, right, did not meet the customer the temperature requirements. Out of 1 million, think about that. Think about how much more productive we can be at a level of Six Sigma, at that type of level of quality. Right? Out of everything we produce, most of that is going to providing the customer what they want. Right? Our resources and the investment go to giving the customer what they need versus us using that money and that time to rework, to remake things, to throw things out as scrap and as defective. That's a lot of productivity right there. 3.4 defects per million opportunities at that level of Six Sigma quality. That's principle number one. Principle number two, Six Sigma follows DMAIC. We consider DMAIC to be our methodology to get Six Sigma and Lean complete. So it's pronounced DMAIC. So it's a process Six Sigma practitioners follow to reduce variability in their business with the use of specific tools. Now this is something, definitely for our amount of time, not enough time to even go through all the details of it all, but it follows define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. What we do here. We'll kind of walk through these in a little bit of detail, but definitely more training would be needed to understand and unpack the tools involved. But by following a methodology, it allows us to be consistent in how we do continuous improvement, which also in turn allows us to be more productive. So the define phase, this is the first step in the DMAIC cycle. Define is about simply documenting the problem and our desired outcome. This is about having a project charter, scoping out the project, having objectives, deciding what is it that we're going to measure. What is the customer wanting in the first place, right? If it's having a cup of coffee at the right temperature, then why are we not doing that? And let's figure out what's happening in our process to fix it. So this is the define phase, about documenting the problem and the desired outcome. Measure. We're going to obtain baseline process performance levels. Right? Collect as much data as we can on the current process so that we have an understanding of where our opportunities may lie. Where are the issues coming from? Is it how long we're burning, having the coffee on the heater, on the burner? Is it the ingredients we're using? What is causing our problem? And so here's just getting an understanding of current performance levels in the measure phase. 3 is analyze. Analyze is about identifying those key process root causes for variation. What factors, what elements in the process is causing it to vary? That we're not able to get a consistent temperature of a cup of coffee. That's the purpose of analyze, to get to a root cause. And so we walk through these steps in DMAIC. If you're familiar with other continuous improvement methodologies, they may sound familiar. Whether it might sound familiar if you're like the PDCA cycle, Plan, Do, Check, Act. If you're just familiar with the lean pieces by itself, like root cause analysis. That's why I was saying there's really nothing new under the sun. There's a different way of looking at things, but Six Sigma and Lean Six Sigma has combined different principles into under one umbrella. The different structure. Improve. The fourth phase in the DMAIC cycle. We wanted to develop, test, and implement solutions. Now that we have an understanding after the analyze phase where our root cause is and what factors could be impacting us, let's go and improve it. We've got to be creative here. We need creative minds to help us come up with solutions, always beneficial. And then lastly, step 5 is control. We're going to monitor key factors and maintain the gains. Here is an example of a typical control tool. This is called a control chart, of which right now you won't be becoming an expert in using this tool if you have not seen it before, but I at least want you to get an understanding of some of the tools that's used in the realm of Lean Six Sigma to help us improve and increase productivity. Right? A control chart is very useful in us seeing and monitoring the process to make sure that the variation stays at a minimum, that we're able to consistently get our customer what they need, and this helps us identify if something unique has occurred that we need to go investigate in the process. Right? Principle number 3 is that Six Sigma is based on data-driven decision-making. And we've all probably been a part of different organizations that make decisions in different ways, whether it's based off of someone's experience, based off of opinion. And what I've seen more often than not, when it's just based off of an experience and opinion, it can cost us productivity. Right? Sometimes that individual is right, and I found many times that they are not as correct as they would think. For many of us, we think we understand what's going on in our processes, especially if we've been around it long enough. But it's quite interesting when we pull data and what the data is telling us. Right? Data removes, and at least it helps us remove any bias that we may have. If we think our process is the most wonderful process in the world, the data is going to show us the true numbers. Right? And yes, data can be manipulated. That is a possibility, but that's why we want to train you as a Lean Six Sigma practitioner to make sure we can interpret data correctly. But principle number 3 is that Six Sigma is a data-driven decision-making process. We want to try to find out what's really important to our customers. Right? How well are we meeting customers' needs? What elements of our process should we focus on to better meet customers' needs? The data can help drive us to the right decision. And that's why I like this illustration here. There's so many roads we can go down, but data will help make our path clear and our path straight. Is another key to unlocking productivity for us individually in what we do and as an organization as a whole. So I like this here. You might have seen this before. So when you need to make a hard decision, flip a coin. Why? Because when that coin is in the air, you suddenly know what you're hoping for. That is not the approach. That's good for life in some cases. Right? If we need to make a decision and we're on the fence, we don't know if we want to go out to dinner or stay in home and watch a movie. If we flip a coin, the one that we're hoping for, that's the thing that we should probably do. That is not how we want to run an organization or business, however. We want to make decisions based on data and not on opinions, hopes, and wishful thinking. I was saying earlier about making sure we're using great data. So let's clarify a little bit. Not every data, not every piece of information is made equally. So make sure that the data is reliable. I like these Dilbert cartoons, especially the ones in regards to Six Sigma. Very fun. Here he's talking about, you can kind of read the cartoon here. It says, I'd like to thank all of the people who helped design the technology test parameters. Thanks to your input, the test had nothing in common with how things work in the real world. So I wasted 2 weeks of my life on a test that is not only meaningless, but also dangerously misleading. This slide shows the gap between the test results and reality. and then his manager is saying, well, use the test results anyway because it's the only data we have. And then he goes into saying, fine, I hope you all choke to death on your lunches, and I'm wondering why he's so cranky. That's something about the data. But I think we've maybe been a part of that situation where data sometimes does not reflect reality. And in our own Six Sigma, we do not want to use that data at all. That is not the case. That's bad data analysis there. So we want to make sure that the data is reliable, that it does, in fact, reflect reality. And that's another key principle to help us unlock that productivity in our organizations. You know, we do talk about there's some tools and techniques in Lean Six Sigma that help us make sure our data is reliable. One of those is called like an MSA, a measurement system analysis. Also, the data should not be used to push an agenda. Okay. Here we have the chief statistician for a company that's saying, I can prove or disprove it. What do you want me to do? Right. So data can be manipulated. I think we've all heard of things that make us cringe about data, right? Whether it's the toothpaste commercial that is telling us that 3 out of 4 doctors approve, or 3 out of 4 dentists approve this or approve that. That's some ways of manipulating data to push an agenda. Not sure how that analysis was conducted or how that sampling was pooled, but they are pushing out statistics everywhere, right, in marketing. And so in our companies, we definitely want to make sure we use these principles in a way that we're not pushing someone's agenda. Right, I've been a part of organizations where a manager or a supervisor and executive wants to deploy a particular IT solution because they like it, and they want to use Six Sigma to prove that it should be used. That's pushing an agenda, and that's not what we want to do. And we'll walk through together as you go through Six Sigma training. You'll see the right way to analyze data, and we'll also show you the wrong way, how not to do it, how not to make the interpretations. But what's critical with Lean Six Sigma that it is a data-driven decision-making process using data correctly. And so what's interesting is when we talk about data in a company, some companies have a lot of data that's used and some don't use the data, right? And what we want to do is get you from one piece of this to the other. We want to get you to the data-driven section. So wherever you find yourself in the spectrum, if your organization or yourself is in data denial, which means you distrust data and avoid using it, you're data indifferent, you don't care about data and have no need for it, or you're data informed, which means you only use it when it supports your opinions or decisions, wherever you find yourself in that spectrum of using data, what will be critical to unlocking productivity for you and your organization is to use data, be data-driven, use it to shape and inform all your decisions, is what we want. That's what we would like to see. So I have seen one question come up already, and I want to address this question. So it says, what is a Six Sigma champion? So that's a term you've heard. There are many different roles in Six Sigma. And so a Six Sigma champion is an individual who pushes, if you will, who is a cheerleader within the organization to make sure holistically that everyone is using Six Sigma, right? Because Six Sigma is a top-down approach. Our organizations are made up of different departments, different leaders. Some may get on board a little bit more slowly using Six Sigma than others. Right, but the champion is encouraging that the entire organization, the entire company starts using the Six Sigma tools and techniques, making sure that they have the resources they need, the training that's necessary to do that. The champion also helps line up or queue up Six Sigma initiatives and projects. Right, so you can think of that Six Sigma champion as the individual, normally an executive within the company, that is pushing for Six Sigma use. So another question that I see. So it's can Lean Six Sigma be applied to all aspects of industries or only manufacturing? Yeah, and this is the great thing about Lean Six Sigma. Now, Lean Six Sigma definitely had its start in more manufacturing environments. But what has been proven, and from my experience, Lean Six Sigma applies to any industry. Any industry. The challenge in applying it, however, is that when using Lean Six Sigma, we have to have a clear understanding of what the customer's requirement is. If we can identify the customer requirement and we can define what a defect is, right? Like in our example, the customer requirement was having a cup of coffee within a certain temperature. And we can define what that is and measure it. We can use Lean Six Sigma. Okay? That is something that is taught and should be explained more, right, to many individuals. is that there's some projects or some initiatives that should be Lean Six Sigma, and there are some that should not use Lean Six Sigma. Right? There are certain elements that should be there. That's not something we're going to get into the details here today, but yes, Lean Six Sigma can definitely be applied to any industry as long as we can understand what our customers' needs are and define our process has a problem in form of a defect. Then we can use these tools to fix things. Principle number 4, and this is the last principle, and this is the one that I like to talk about a lot, is that principle number 4, to be successful, to use Lean Six Sigma to unlock productivity. Right? Productivity can only be unlocked by being a change agent. And so even though we're talking about the keys of Lean Six Sigma, the techniques, right, the methodology, a lot of it's going to have to be a lot of it is attributed to the individuals, the Six Sigma, the Lean Six Sigma practitioners. And being a change agent is very critical, and I'll explain why, of how if we want to unlock productivity in our companies. That this illustration that you're seeing here are different skill sets, right? These different circles. So, and these are all what makes a change agent. And so some individuals are great number crunchers, right? They're good at pulling data, they're great at statistical analysis. It's perfect. They can do a regression analysis, hypothesis testing, they can calculate standard deviation and averages and tell you the trends. And that's one aspect of being a change agent. Some individuals are great with the business acumen. Right? They understand revenue and cost, and they can see opportunities from a business side. And we have others that are great with political skills. Right? They're great communicators, good orators. They can encourage and get people excited. And so when we look at some of these, where they enter, when they change and cross over, for instance, if we have someone who's a great number cruncher, right, you might see them as, and they understand the business acumen, they might be considered like a business analyst, or they just analyze the data. There's nothing wrong with that role. That's a perfect role. Every company, we need our analysts. But an analyst in itself, using the skills of Lean Six Sigma, that will not unlock any productivity. Right? We have data that we looked at, we see root causes, we see trends, but nothing was changed within the company or the organization. We didn't make the process better. If we're not taking our data and driving change and leading, how are we unlocking productivity? We're not. We're just providing information. And so that's another reason why being a change agent is critical. If we have the business acumen and we have the political skills, right, we can be seen as a leader, but what are we leading individuals to? That's the question. We're leading them to our own agenda, or we're leading them to the root cause of the problem, right? Or we're leading them to fix the right issues. So we can have that leadership component, but without the data, where are we going? That's the question. Where are we headed? So that leadership in itself is not enough to unlock this productivity. And this last piece up here, having the political skills and the number cruncher, will be more of just a siren. We'll be sharing everyone what the problem is, and we'll be able to communicate the problem, but without that business piece, we're just sounding the alarm. Right? This is the issue. This is our issue. But we need all of these three components together to enact change in the organization, to unlock that productivity. So we can have all the techniques down, we can have all the methods down of Lean Six Sigma, right? But without having those change agents within your company, without being one yourself, there's nothing that we really accomplish. Right? Nothing breakthrough. Right? Nothing significant as far as that process improvement. So being a change agent is critical, and not all of us are born with these skill sets. We have to learn it. We have to have that experience, right, to get there, be mentored to get there. But this is the critical key to unlocking productivity. So this is a funny illustration that I found about being the change agent. There's a lot of tools that we have, right? One of the things about being a change agent is one of those terms that's used a lot in industries now, in different markets and companies. And there's a lot of tools that we have, whether it's our data analysis. Here, this change agent has the carrot approach versus the stick, rewards and incentives, has his knowledge. A lot of different things here. When you're a change agent, it almost feels like you're a superhero or a hero within the company. But what I like about this is that we're all capable of being change agents. Right? Just need the right training, that right push, and we can all enact change. We can all learn to do this. Now, what's good is that there's different styles of being a change agent. Not every change agent looks the same or operates the same way. And it really is going to depend on, company culture, on your regional culture. And a lot of it has to do on the environment of what that change agent could look like and would look like. The one on the left, there's different types of leadership styles. I know a lot of individuals like the type of leadership style when they talk about a leader gets down in the trenches with you. The leader helps. Right? And so in this case, this may not be an ideal leadership scenario for a lot of individuals. Right? Where the leader is on top of the arrow, everyone else is lifting, but the leader is at least pointing the direction. Right? In some cultures, they like the leader to be down there holding the arrow with everybody else, the change agent. In other cultures, this is what is expected. The leader to be pointing the way and focusing efforts on figuring out what's wrong and providing solutions and recommendations. That's what's desired. And so we can't say there's one type of change agent that's going to fit every scenario. Right? There's different variations of being a change agent, but those three principles will always remain the same. You need the business acumen, we need the leadership or the political capability, and also the number cruncher. But it can manifest itself or it can be seen differently. That's why the illustration on the left or the right is here, is that these change agents can come in different shapes and sizes. Right? So not everyone will look the same, and that's good. And I want you to know that before we end today's webinar, as we're walking through these things, is that you don't have to fit a certain mold. Right? Just make sure that we're going to understand how to crunch the numbers, work on those communication skills, and also understand the business. Right? And your own personality will play a huge role in your change agent style. And every company needs different types of change agents to enact the change necessary and unlock that productivity. And so you may be wondering, well, with Six Sigma, there's a lot going on. How do I do this? Especially with the statistical analysis component. So here, this is an illustration, a graph, showing the important factors for a Lean Six Sigma practitioner. It's typical, right? Overcoming obstacles is roughly like 34% of what's needed from a skill set perspective. The attitude, over 25%. Logical thought process, about 13%. Communication skills, 9%. And then down here we see where a lot of people, when they think of Lean Six Sigma, they think of these elements here, the data interpretation ability, the mathematical skills. Those are on the lower end of what we require, of what's needed to be a successful Lean Six Sigma practitioner. Right? And the reason for that, there's many different reasons. The reason for that is that there's a ton of statistical software packages out nowadays that are going to run and crunch the numbers for you. Now, you will have to understand what the results are telling you, right? What that direction you should go based off of the interpretation, but you're not required to memorize a lot of the formulas or understand the ins and outs of regression analysis, right, to be successful. Right? That goes under that number cruncher category, that yes, over the years, with time and experience and training, you'll become more and more knowledgeable on the statistical side of the house, but to unlock productivity in your organization, that is not critical. Right? What's critical is that mindset to overcome obstacles, that attitude that can go get things done, right? That wants to bring people together and get them excited about enacting change in their organization. Right? So the takeaway here is that a degree in math or a PhD in statistics is not required to be a Lean Six Sigma change agent. So either you're an agent of change or you're destined to become a victim of change. You simply can't survive over the long term if you insist on standing still. And that's a quote from Norm Brodsky. He's an entrepreneur. I always like that quote on being a change agent. And so I always encourage everyone when I try to teach at a seminar or a webinar at the end to choose to be a change agent today. So whether you are considering to learn more about Lean Six Sigma, that's good. That's a good step. I want you to learn those tools about unlocking productivity for your organization, but also learn about being a change agent, that complete package as well. It's not just about the tools and techniques, but about how we lead, how we guide, how we encourage those around us. And for those of you that are acting in change agents, I want to thank you all for what you're doing in your organizations. I always believe that quality impacts all of us. So the quality, the improvements that we're giving in each of our organizations give us all a better outlook on life, right? Improves everything. It makes our world more productive. So I implore you all to be a change agent today. So our conclusion is how Six Sigma makes us more productive, or how it unlocks, it's the key to unlocking productivity, is based off those 4 principles. Right? It focuses on quality, number 1. Number 2, follows the process called DMAIC. 3, adheres to data-driven decisions. And then 4, being a change agent is critical to unlocking the productivity that's already there in our processes, in our organizations. But this is our conclusion. And what we're going to do now is I'm going to go through the questions that you have presented. Thank you for these questions. I love answering them and engaging with you. So one of the questions that we have here, so with the time left, we'll kind of walk through different questions. What would you recommend to a beginner to tackle and to penetrate his way from the yellow all the way to the MBB? I'm going to answer this in 2 different ways. Now, from a Lean Six Sigma perspective, I think yellow belt, and there might be in some cases a white belt in some organizations that's just focused on lean. A yellow belt is just like a Six Sigma or Lean Six Sigma information or awareness class. Now, to start off as a black belt, the only requirement, the only belt that has a requirement is an MBB, a Master Black Belt. And the requirement is that you have to be a black belt for so many years or conduct so many projects. So there is no prerequisite to being a black belt. You don't have to be a green belt for so many years or a yellow belt. If you like, you're able to go straight to black belt training if you feel that you're ready for that. Right? If you already have some statistical knowledge and background, that your ramp up won't be too difficult, that's fine. Many individuals will start with the green belt class first because it's an introduction. They learn some of the basic statistics, get some experience there. Then they go further to the black belt. But there is no set industry standard prerequisite that you have to do a green belt before a black belt. But it is highly recommended. Right, so my recommendation, if that's what you want to do, and it depends on your company culture. If you have a company that has a Lean Six Sigma culture set in place, you're already going to have a mentor. But the recommendation I would have, if you want to shoot your way up, if the way you're talking about penetrate your way up to a Master Black Belt, find a mentor. Find someone who is a Master Black Belt already and have them guide you and train you, whether that's within your own organization or someone outside of your organization. Right? Join quality groups, whether it's ASQ, things of that nature, and link up, network with other Master Black Belts and have them mentor you and kind of walk you through the journey. Another question is Six Sigma approach really helpful in every industry? How should we apply the DMAIC principle? Yep. I would say Six Sigma approach is really helpful in every industry. And again, on that, guys, I want us to think about it's applicable to every industry, but not applicable to every type of problem. Right? It depends on the type of problem. We have to be able to identify what the customer's needs are. If we can't clearly identify the customer requirement, it's going to be hard to use the tools of Lean Six Sigma because it's all focused on what the customer's needs are. And so as long as our problem can do that, and there'll be some other things that needs to be looked at from a problem standpoint. So it's not really about industry specific, it's more of problem type specific. And here the other part of the question was how to apply the DMAIC principle. Right? So with DMAIC, there's going to be a certain set of tools that are used. I know at a high level we talked about define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. If you're taking or you're going through the Six Sigma, Lean Six Sigma training, we'll teach you, we'll show you what are the tools and techniques that have to be used in the DMAIC or the define process. What is the deliverable, the objective, right, the outcome. So it's going to walk you step by step on how to apply that principle, which unfortunately is not something that we have time for today, but that's how. Each of those phases is going to have a set of tools that are going and techniques used. So another question that came up is, does Kaizen fall into this model too? Yes, it does. Kaizen falls into the model. It's one of the things on the umbrella, more on the lean side. Right? For those of you familiar with the term Kaizen, this is a Japanese term that means like change for the better or improvement, quick change. Kaizen has many different translations, but all of them are correct. Kaizen is a broad term about improving our processes. So Kaizen principles do fall into this, and in some cases the way I've been taught about even doing Kaizen, normally a Kaizen event is we bring everyone together, all the stakeholders to focus on an issue, and we focus on that issue, and we're talking about a Kaizen event here, and we focus on that issue for a week or 3 days or however long it takes to make some rapid change occur. And so I've heard it said that Kaizen is like DMAIC on steroids in a way, where we go through the DMAIC cycle, but we do it within a week with a group and a team there. And so they are all related. Kaizen is also a cultural approach, but it is a part of this overall concept. It does fit in there, particularly on the lean side when we talk about Lean Six Sigma. So another question is, what is the prerequisite for a Lean Six Sigma certification? Awesome question. So if you're going for a yellow belt or a black, or not black belt, a yellow belt or a green belt, the prerequisite from an industry standard or across industry, just accepted in the marketplace, is just to take, or I should say, just to pass the exam, right? Not even to take training if you don't need it. If you can pass an exam, then you can be certified. Right. Now, for black belt, what's needed is you have to work a project and pass an exam to show competency to be a certified Six Sigma black belt. And for that master black belt, that's just, you have to be a black belt for many years, working projects, and then you have to take a different exam and show your project results, like a project portfolio, for a master black belt. Now, that's just accepted. Now, different companies may handle their program slightly differently. I know when I got my green belt certification, I was required to work a project, but that was because I was certifying through that company. But across the industry, typically a project for a green belt is not required, but one is required for a black belt. Okay? And speaking of that, that leads to the next question. This question says, may I please know the exact difference between a green belt and a black belt? Absolutely. So what we're looking at here are several factors. A green belt is typically a part-time role within the organization, at least a part-time quality role. Normally someone who's trained as a green belt, they'll still complete and conduct their normal day-to-day activities, but on occasion they'll lead a Six Sigma project, or they'll even partner and help a Six Sigma black belt on a project. So they kind of do two different functions here. Their normal day in and day out activities. If they're a coder, for instance, they'll code half the day, or not literally, but just as an illustration, they'll code half the day, and then the other half of the day they'll work a project, or they'll help a black belt work another project. A black belt is a full-time role, so that's all a black belt will be doing is working projects. And so a question comes up is, what is your career goal? If you really enjoy what you're doing, maybe you don't want to operate as a black belt. You want to operate as a green belt, right? It means you do the role part-time. Now, a certification, of course, does not define your role. I've known individuals who are certified black belts or master black belts that don't even, they have that certification, but they operate as an operational person, if you will. They do day-to-day activities, whether they're a coder or patient registration. Right? They just have that tool set underneath their belt, but they could go for a position that's a full-time role in those areas. And so from a training perspective, the black belt has more statistical knowledge than the green belt, right? Goes through more advanced statistical tools, goes through more training and experience on leadership. And so those are some of the main differences. From a project perspective, green belt projects are typically expected only to bring in like a financial benefit of $50,000 a year. Black belt projects are expected to impact the company with $200,000 a year in financial benefit on their projects. So larger in scope. So another question that we have here. So in the IT service desk, how does Lean Six Sigma help in productivity, and how to apply the techniques? Yep. So when we're talking about a service desk, this is a great example of using Lean Six Sigma. I've had some IT individuals ask about coding and things of that nature, and it does help. It helps. But IT service desk is great because in the IT service desk, there's typically a process that's followed. Right, in order to get a ticket in, how do we filter tickets to the right people, things of that nature. Now, as far as coming up to a solution, because IT, we're trying to fix a problem, right? Someone's computer crashed, we don't know why. Six Sigma is not going to tell us why the computer crashed, of course, right? Someone with their expertise about computer crashing have to go in and diagnose the computer and figure out what happened. And so where it's going to help for productivity standpoint is that there is a process that's followed, right? There's the help desk process where a ticket gets generated, it's sent, and what needs to happen is we make sure that the ticket gets to the right person quickly. I've been seen some IT organizations where they're not clear of who the ticket should go to, right? And there's different reasons why, whether they're not sure what the real issue is. Right? That could be one reason, and they need to figure out how can we get better information from our customer, which is probably someone within the business,
right, who has an IT issue? How can we get better information the first time so we can route these tickets correctly and not have a lot of rework and recommunication, which is extending our delivery time, right? So Six Sigma and Lean will be applied there to find out what key requirements do we need, what questions should we ask ahead of time. You know, those things would be used. That will allow us to be more productive, and that's just one aspect there, one element. There are several different things that we could do. That's a great question. Okay, someone is curious about what I was saying earlier. Now, what is the trigger point for identifying a Lean Six Sigma project? Yep. And so I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. Now, there are a couple triggers to identify if a project or if an issue should be a Lean Six Sigma issue, right? And now, some of the things is, right, we need to understand the customer's requirements. It should be a quality issue that we're dealing with here. The root cause of the problem should not be known, because a lot of the tools and techniques we're using is to help us drill down to a root cause. If we already know it, it should probably just be something that gets, it's a go-do project. We don't need the tools of Lean Six Sigma to get it done. Or if the solution is known already, we don't need Lean Six Sigma either. Right? If we know we need to implement a new system, if the equipment is just outdated, right, we don't need Lean Six Sigma to prove any of that. We should just go get it done. Now, those are some of the triggers that tell us if it should or should not be a Lean Six Sigma project. Right? If we don't know the root cause, that's great. We can use Lean Six Sigma. That's perfect opportunity. And there are some other things as well. There's not just one trigger. There's actually a couple of things, like a checklist that we would go through to evaluate the projects. The entire checklist, right, with the questions we have, I won't have time to walk through those checklists. But I do want you to know that you're right. There are certain triggers, certain things that we're looking for that determines if a project could fit that Six Sigma model and that it may not. So the next question is, do I think that Six Sigma would be relevant in government departments which providing various services to citizens? Absolutely, yes. Six Sigma, and I've talked to different Six Sigma practitioners that have used it, that have consulted with government, at least in their their respective regions and countries, to implement projects to help citizens. So there is benefit there. Right? All governments could use some help reducing costs and improving productivity. Right? And so that the tools of Six Sigma definitely applies from a government standpoint. So the next question is, how is Six Sigma useful for retail support services? So the answer to that question, I would say, is very similar to some of the other answers so far. Right? And it is all going to depend on the problem. As long as we have a customer requirement, we can use Six Sigma. But it's going to depend on the type of problem that we have. Someone asked a question about Kanban. So I see you're familiar with Lean. So do we have something for Kanban here? In the realm of Lean Six Sigma, absolutely. Because when we say Lean Six Sigma, which is great in this methodology for productivity, we have the benefits of Lean and Six Sigma. So for those of you that are Lean trained or know a lot about Lean, all that gets rolled into the Lean Six Sigma component. Now, the difference is when we're talking about Lean and Six Sigma together, what we would do first, we would do Lean. So if we want to go improve a process or run a project, we'll use the Lean tools first, remove the waste from a process, and then use the Six Sigma tools second. Right? So everything that you know about Lean, Kanban, Kaizen, those tools will be utilized first, and then we would transfer over and use some of the Six Sigma tools. So how does Lean Six Sigma differ for TQM? Now, TQM, Total Quality Management, and Lean Six Sigma are very similar. Now, Total Quality Management is a different technique. Right? It follows a different process. One of the main differences, it doesn't have DMAIC in TQM. One of the main differences, and there are several other differences between them. But at the end of the day, this is what I would say, because I get questions about like this. I'm going to kind of expand this question a little bit. The questions I receive are, well, why use Lean Six Sigma versus any other continuous improvement methodology? Honestly, even though Lean Six Sigma, I'm a huge proponent of it, and that I think it does unlock productivity, there are other continuous improvement tools that do as well. Right? And I think about even Toyota. Toyota does not use Lean Six Sigma. Toyota still to this day, unless they've changed recently, use Lean only. Right? As you may know, Lean came from Toyota. They don't see the need for Six Sigma. Lean works just For them, it's just as good for them. It gives them the productivity they need. And so I would, my case here is that as long as there's some continuous improvement methodology being used, right, that's what's important here. We can argue philosophically of which one is better than another, things of that nature. From my experience, I say as long as the organization is committed to one, has that top management support to make it successful, that's going to drive change in an organization, whether that's Lean or Six Sigma or Lean Six Sigma or TQM. But there are some minor differences between them, more of the process standpoint and their area of focus. So a question here, yep, good observation. So here the question is Sigma is explained in detail, but no mention of Lean. And why is that? Really, I think there's really there's no bias there, right? I do like Lean as well. I think it was just based off of my training and my experience. Right? When I work a project, I don't typically work a project from a Lean standpoint. I work it following the Six Sigma approach, but I incorporate Lean tools into it. Right? And that's typically what happens, and you'll see when you take like a Lean Six Sigma training class, which is very interesting. Lean tools and concepts are talked about, but it's typically the DMAIC cycle that's followed when we're using a project. So I tried to use the words when I talked about it. Normally, I kind of just truncate the expression to say Six Sigma, but I am really referring to Lean Six Sigma. So hopefully I was communicating that with my words. When I talk about Six Sigma, it's Lean Six Sigma that I'm referring to, and not just one methodology over another. Both are required when we're talking about Lean Six Sigma to unlock productivity in an organization. Because I believe Lean Six Sigma gives us the efficiency. Lean gives us the efficiency, and Six Sigma gives us the effectiveness. So we need both.